Pixel Therapy is a member of the But Why Though Podcast Network.
Go to butwhythoughpodcast.com for an inclusive geek community offering pop culture news, reviews, and podcasts.
Hello, game appreciators. This is Ali from Zero Brightness, a podcast about horror video games. Zero Brightness is a show where my guests and I discuss horror video games and the many things that surround and inform them. We aim to give insightful analysis and raise some of the big questions about the medium from an artist's perspective, while also just having a good time. If that sounds cool to you, you can find us on just about every podcast service. We'll see you out there.
Video games can be art too.
Yes. Oh, they definitely are. I've been in art galleries. I was in the Smithsonian. It's definitely art.
Fuck yeah. I was in the Smithsonian, bitches. It's art.
I said that the last time someone did art games art, and I was like, I don't know, I was in the Smithsonian. It's probably art.
You tell me.
Welcome to Pixel Therapy, the video game podcast where we look at the games we play through the lens of the player, where what you play is just as important as how you play it, and where emotional intelligence is a critical stat. Every other week, we bring on a guest who may or may not consider themselves a gamer to discuss the games that have made them and changed them, and all the feelings they have about our favorite pastime. I'm your co-host, Jamie, pronouns she, her.
And I'm your co-host, Spencer, pronouns they, them.
And this is Pixel Therapy. Some new and noteworthies for everyone this week. Our March Patreon bonus episode is up on patreon.com/pixeltherapypod. You can go over there, and for just $2, you can listen to Spencer and I pick our fantasy lineup of 2021 game releases. Hear about all the games we can't wait to play this year, or in some cases can't wait to watch other people play, because I'm at least a very big chicken. Mm-hmm. Big chicken.
But I want to see that big, tall, scary lady.
I want to see her.
What is
it? Yeah, people want her to please step on me, big, scary lady. It's like fantasy football, basically what we're doing. It's like a drafty kind of thing. Well, you drafty the games. So like fantasy football, but way nerdier.
And if it makes you feel any better, Jamie had to send me many paragraphs about how to do it and walk me through it and hold my hand, because I was very nervous because I don't know anything about sports. So I know it sounds scary. You hear fantasy football, and a lot of images pop in your head, but it was a lot of fun, and I really like the website. So yeah, come join us.
Yeah. Come listen to the episode and check that out over on Patreon. Every month on Patreon, Spencer and I are dropping bonus deep dive episodes, which is just the two of us digging into fun topics. So if you want more Pixel Therapy, you can head on over to patreon.com/pixeltherapypod and check it out. If you're not up for contributing on Patreon, no worries. You'll keep getting your biweekly dose of Pixel Therapy on your podcast service of choice. Mm-hmm. However, if you want to know how you can support the show for free, rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts is actually a huge help. If you like what we do here on Pixel Therapy, come let us know. We'd love to read your thoughts and feelings on an upcoming episode. Maybe add a new segment.
Oh my God, please. Please give us a review.
All right, that's enough of that. Time to get cozy, pull up an armchair, feel free to lie down on the couch, and let's talk about our feelings. Spencer, how are you doing today?
Well, it's been a rough week. Mm-hmm. I feel like I keep saying that, which I hope y'all know I'm not. Things are generally, I have lots to be thankful for, and I'm generally, I think, doing well. I have been having a lot of weird dreams. Sorry, this is such a tangent, but I have been having a lot of weird dreams lately because I'm in the process of hashtag mental health awareness. I am in the process of switching medications because I have anxiety and depression and complex PTSD, and so I treat that with a couple of medications, and sometimes SSRIs, prescribers or psychiatrists, people who prescribe you the medication, are kind of we don't really know how it works. Some work and some don't. You just got to kind of try stuff. But I've been on Prozac for a year, and it just hasn't really been working. And so I'm in the process of weaning off of it. But in that process, I think my sleep's been a little weird, and the dreams I have been visceral and vivid and frightening in a way that has been new. So that's been an adventure. It's just a really fun backdrop to just everything that's happening in the world right now. We are recording this episode on Saturday, March 20th, just to give folks a sense of when this conversation is happening.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just been a really sad week here in the U.S. For the Asian American community, of which I am a part, and just what's happening to our elders and to the 6 women who were murdered this week by a white terrorist.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be real. It's been painful too. Just it feels like the way the media has been covering this event is just indicative of the way that like Asian women are kind of grouped together and anonymized, where the white dude who like caused all this shit is his name and his face and his story are plastered everywhere. Just the way we think of Asian women, the way we think of sex workers, misogyny. It's just, it's been rough. And I wish I had, I guess, better words to communicate like what I'm feeling. And I think it's hard feeling so distant from my family too right now. I guess I'm glad in some ways that my grandmother is mostly spending her time at home these days. But it's okay to not be okay. And it's okay to not always have the right words.
Yeah. Even if you're a podcaster.
Yeah. Even if you're a podcaster. But I'm thinking of the 6 women we lost. Sun, Hyun, Suncha, Young, Daoyo, and Chao Jie. Thinking of my family and friends that I can't be with right now. I actually wanted to read, there's a really great poem that Chanel Miller just posted on her Instagram yesterday that I think if folks aren't familiar with Chanel, she's the author of Know My Name. And I would definitely look her up and her story. She's an amazing person, a really resilient person. But I just wanted to read the last couple passages of the poem she wrote, just to kind of take some space to sit with these feelings with you all. But I highly recommend going and looking at the rest. And at the end of the episode today, when we do our side quests, I'll also share some resources that folks can look into if they want to learn more about what's been going on, and how you can, push back against the violence that the AAPI community is facing. Anyway, Chanel writes, 6 Asian women means 6 lives, means 6 origin stories. I have some important questions. What songs did they know by heart? What is their most worn piece of clothing? What did they have for breakfast that morning? What photos sit on their nightstands? What snacks did they buy as treats? Who were they most looking forward to hugging when the pandemic is over? Why is nobody asking? Follow-up question. How cruel is it that marginalized communities live with the knowing that they must not only fear death, but also disappearing? So, yeah, it's been a hard week, but I just I just want to send love out to my other Asian diaspora fam, and thanks for giving me the space, Jamie, to share some of these feels. And
absolutely,
yeah, I thank you for that. I just wanted to take that space, but I also am excited to have this time to talk about something that brings us joy, video games. This is a video game podcast. Just I just like to remind folks of, because we often just tend to go off the rails a little. Not off the rails, but I think one of the things I love about this space is that we can, we talk about games, but we're also living in talking about them through this lens of our identities and our experiences, and just finding the connections between our love of games and the other things that make us human. And so this is part of that. And thanks for being along for the ride. And one thing I did want to talk about was this morning, just as a way to kind of, I realized I was so busy this week and also just so consumed with the news and such that I wasn't really making any time to just unwind and play something. So I did finish Firewatch this morning, which is the game I was talking about last episode, where essentially it's like a walking simulator. You play as Henry, and you are a fire lookout volunteer in the Shoshone National Park in Wyoming. Okay, so one thing I wanted to say is I was a little too gay for this game in that the game has no fast travel, and you literally have to pull out a hiking map that is literally like a real hiking map that just has lines on it and freaking terrain. I can't read that shit. Yeah, you gave me a compass, but I cannot tell you how many minutes. I feel like half of the full gameplay time was me standing there zooming in and out of the map and crying because I could not figure out how the F to get somewhere.
Oh,
so
no.
That, I'll admit, my ineptitude reading maps did kind of take me out of the emotional zeniths of the end of the game, because I was supposed to be running location to location. I was like, oh my God, where am I? Who's dying? What?
Literally lost in the woods.
Yeah, but the game, really, really interesting, tight narrative adventure. I highly recommend. I didn't want to spoil it too much. I think the joy of the game for me was going into it knowing as little as possible about the story.
Yeah.
So I don't want to spoil the ending, because it's a very quick game. I think you could play it in 4 hours, honestly, if you had the focus and can read a map better than old Spency. But yeah, really great experience. And again, I just appreciated the through line of I think the story really invites you to take from it what you want to. I think you could end the story with a bunch of different perspectives on the characters and readings on their behaviors and their flaws, and I just love that the game doesn't tell you how to feel.
Yeah. Well, I'm really, really glad you enjoyed it. We'll have to have a spoiler-filled discussion off the air.
Yeah.
I guess my question that you could maybe answer without spoilers is what was your feeling of the overall narrative? Were you on board for how everything wrapped up narratively, or did you? Yeah, I don't know. How did you feel about the narrative overall as you got to the end of it?
Yeah, I have seen critiques of it. I guess I haven't seen many. I know that their critiques exist. I enjoyed it. I found it realistic. I think that the game is grounded. It feels real in a way that I don't often get from a lot of games. I think that if they had tried to push the story too hard, then it would have maybe ruined the experience and the magic of the game for me. But I honestly felt like maybe it wasn't what I was expecting, but I think that it fit within the world of Firewatch. And I think that it served the purpose of taking the characters on the journey that they needed to go on.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, though? Do you disagree?
Well, it's been a while since I played it, so I don't even necessarily remember the exact narrative beats. But I do remember leaving the game thinking that there is an element of mystery and dread to the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I left the game thinking that I would have been more interested, and this would just be a completely different game, so maybe this isn't even valid feedback, but I would have been more interested in the story if they just left the entire mystery component out of it. I would have been
just made it about the two characters.
Just made it about Henry and Delilah, and Henry processing what's going on in his personal life that he's avoiding with his partner.
Yeah, that's a great point. I do feel like the mystery sort of overtakes the latter half of the story, and it doesn't even become about the two characters anymore. And also it almost kind of leans so much into being cinematic, and it feels like a movie like a thriller.
Yeah.
And yeah, I hear that. When you say that, I agree. The characters are kind of lost.
It's like I wanted an indie movie or like a dramedy, and I got a psychological thriller.
Yeah, like a drom-com.
Yeah.
Rom-com dram.
Yeah, and I feel like the game, like in those first, I mean, I think where you were at in the game when we talked last time.
Yeah.
Like, I do think it was a different game.
Yeah.
And it hits a point where it goes into this, the psychological thriller narrative, and it just dramatically changes the game for me. And I was really on board with what they were doing in the first 1 to 2 hours and wanted more of that. But I still think it's it's still a game that I really love and that I think people should play. I think it does so many interesting things. And I'm sorry he struggles so much with the map. I remember thinking the map was such a cool mechanic. Yeah. Just such an interesting way that you actually pull the map up in game, and like you can see Henry's hands holding it, and you're actually navigating that way rather than the game giving you just a point on the screen to walk towards. You have to actually find your own way through things. I do remember getting lost and confused sometimes. Like, I think that's very real, but I also thought that was kind of part of the experience they were trying to give you. But then I do think that that's like at odds with some of this other stuff that they're doing with the narrative as you go into the game.
Right. It's hard to sustain the dramatic tension when I'm like, oh, wait, hold on. Let me just pull out my map and remember which way I'm supposed to be running.
Like, I feel like so much of the mechanics and the framing of the game really would have spoken to the narrative if they had kept with what they set up in the intro. And I don't know if it was a pressure to make the game more palatable to a wider audience, or I don't know what it was, or if that was just legitimately the story they wanted to tell. But going the direction that they did, I think kind of takes away from some of those quieter, more like tactile mechanics that they brought into the game. And you reach a point, where it's like, shit's on fire and you're pulling out your map to try to figure out how to get from point A to point B. Like, it just doesn't, it makes it lose its sense of urgency, and also makes the map annoying when it could have been more exploratory and like peaceful.
Yeah. So. Firewatch, the game that gives you everything, the whole spectrum.
Do you think you'll try Gone Home?
I would love to play Gone Home. I'm also getting super excited about this Life is Strange remake and remaster that's coming out.
Are you going to play through? You think you're going to play through them all?
I think so. Well, it's funny timing because I just bought the original Life is Strange, which I was going to play after Firewatch. But then I saw the news about this remaster, and I was like, F, should I wait?
I honestly, so what they're doing is the remaster going to have everything, or is it just Life is Strange 1 Before the Storm and then this? So they made an announcement that this is a Square Enix, right? The Square Enix conference that was earlier this week, where they did like a video conference.
Bold of you to assume.
I'm sorry, I know.
I'm up on the gaming news.
Okay. Anyway, there was a video conference earlier this week. They rolled out that there's going to be a new Life is Strange game called Life is Strange True Colors.
Yes, it was the Square Enix thing. God,
there we go.
So smart.
Hardly. I just have an infinite capacity in my brain for useless information. So they announced that, and they said that as part of that, they're going to release a remaster, but I'm not sure what's all included in the remaster. Do you have it up there now?
Yes. Following the reveal of the brand new Life is Strange game, True Colors, a story about the power of empathy and dealing with loss. Square Enix also confirmed that the Life is Strange Remastered Collection is dropping this fall. It comes with Before the Storm and the original Life is Strange.
Okay. This remaster situation is so weird to me. And if I can get a little nerdy...
It's not super clear.
If I can get a little nerdy, I'll explain why.
Yeah.
Life is Strange Season 1, which is about Max and Chloe, that was made by Don't Nod, the studio Don't Nod, right? Then we have Life is Strange Before the Storm. That's a prequel to Life is Strange Season 1 that focuses on Chloe, and it's made by this studio called Deck 9, right? Then we have Life is Strange Season 2. This is Don't Nod again. It's a completely unrelated story, arguably the best Life is Strange game. However, they spread the episodes out too far, so it took like a year and a half for all of the episodes to come out, and it was largely ignored by games media. A really, really fucking good game about two young brothers, Latinx brothers whose father is killed by a police officer, and they're fleeing the country. Trying to flee the country, but it's like this story of the little brother has the ability to move things with his mind, and his older brother is trying to protect him and hide that fact from people. So it's them trying to like navigate that space, and you play as the older brother, where you're trying to like impart good parental advice on your little brother. Really fucking good game. That's Don't Nod. Then Don't Nod gets bought by Microsoft. We get Tell Me Why, right? Which is essentially Life is Strange, but they don't actually call it Life is Strange.
Yeah.
Right? That's exclusive to Xbox. Now, here comes Deck 9 saying we're doing a new Life is Strange game. So clearly, Square Enix still owns the Life is Strange brand, and Don't Nod isn't able to make Life is Strange games anymore, ?
Oh, so they're calling it something else?
Right. So Don't Nod did, when they released Tell Me Why, it was just Tell Me Why. They didn't call it Life is Strange, even though it was like very much a Life is Strange-esque game. Now Deck 9's coming out with this remaster. They're remastering the first season of Life is Strange, which is a Don't Nod game, Before the Storm, which is a Deck 9 game. They're skipping Life is Strange 2 altogether.
Right.
And then pairing that up with True Colors. I don't know. It's just weird. It's weird to me. Also, all of these games came out on PS4 and Xbox, and this remaster is for PS4 and Xbox. So it's not even specifically PS5, and it's not even like specifically remastered to run on PS5 and the Xbox Series X and S, which it will run on those consoles, but the fact that they're not like upgrading it to that level is just like, what? I don't know. It's very odd to me. I don't quite know why they're doing this, why they're repackaging it this way. I hate that Life is Strange 2 is left out altogether, though I have to assume it's some sort of like back-end marketing weirdness because of the way the two different developers and all the ownership with Microsoft and stuff is panning out. I'm excited for True Colors, but this remaster situation just looks weird as hell.
Yeah, wow. Oh my God.
So that's my nerdy, I'm confused take.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure the remaster will run a bit better, but I mean, I don't know. If you already bought Life is Strange, I would just play it. It looked good. It ran fine. Like,
okay.
They're very, they're like it's like hand-drawn art kind of style game anyway. It's not, I don't think the graphical fidelity is what makes that game what it is. So that's my 2 cents. Okay.
Well, then maybe next time we talk, I'll have played Gone Home and Life is Strange and something else too. Let's see.
Let's see what we can throw in there.
Yeah.
All right.
But anyway, enough about me. What are you playing?
Never enough about you. I am playing Signs of the Sojourner, or I guess you could say I've played Sojourner.
Yeah, Sojourner.
I looked it up before this, and I'm still like, Signs of the Sojourner. Anyway, Signs of the Sojourner is the debut game from the indie studio Echo Dog Games. It was originally released on PC in May of 2020. Just came out on PlayStation March 17th, 2021. It's also out on Xbox and Switch, but I played it on PlayStation. This game actually has some writing from our episode 9 guest, Sisi Jiang. Yeah, they contributed to the writing on the game. They're listed as an additional writer.
Oh.
This game is super cool. For some context, I have technically completed the game, but it's the kind of game that's set up that you want to play it multiple times. So I probably will play through it again. It's a total run was like 4, maybe 5 hours of playtime.
Okay.
It's described as a narrative deck building game. So you're playing with cards, and it's about communication. Let me explain a little bit. The way what happens in the game. First of all, it's set in like a slightly futuristic world, but like very realistic future. So this is, the effects of climate change have really started to impact the planet. And folks are kind of, they're living without all of the resources that we have today. There's cities that are underwater. There's folks who are going without water, have very limited water, access to resources. Towns have become very isolated communities that are really looking out for themselves and wary of outsiders. And you are a person who has taken over your mother's shop in this town called Bartow. And the way your mother would get items to sell in the shop to the citizens of Bartow is by going on this caravan that goes all through the neighboring towns and buys things from their local vendors and then brings them back to Bartow to sell them to the local residents. So you're a sojourner. You're going to go on this trip, and you do this monthly to bring supplies back to your town. When you're on your travels, you have to have conversations with the people of the other towns in order to be able to negotiate getting goods from them. You have conversations in this game not through picking dialogue options in a dialogue tree, but instead by playing a mini card game with the people that you're conversing with. So the cards in this game they start out very simple. Your initial deck has just triangles and circles. Each card has a symbol on the left and the right. When you're in conversation with someone, the cards are being laid down left to right. Each person plays one card at a time for the most part. And you're trying to match the symbol on the right-hand side of the other player's card with the left-hand side of your card. And that keeps a conversation going. So let's say
starting a chain.
Yeah, starting a chain. So let's say I'm talking to someone and they lay down a card that has a triangle on the left and the right. I have to lay my card down to the right of their card, so I need to match a triangle. So I could play a card that has a triangle on the left and a circle on the right, or I could play a card that has 2 triangles on it, so on and so on. You get cards that have different abilities that do different things that allow you to for example, there's a card called Accommodate, and it just duplicates the symbols on the other card. So if someone played a card with 2 triangles and you play the Accommodate card, it turns into a card with 2 triangles. You're going through different rounds of these conversations, and there's usually an allowance for failed states in the conversation. So that's indicated by these little squares that they put at the top of the screen. So, for example, I might go into a conversation and I see there's 2 white squares and 3 black squares. That means the conversation will end when I get through 2 white squares, which is 2 positive strains of conversation where we complete a line with our cards, or if I hit 3 negative conversation threads, meaning we don't complete a line with our cards. If you're completing the negative, the black ones, then that means that the conversation doesn't go anywhere. You guys don't connect. They might get mad at you. They might say, why are you being mean to me? They might say, stop talking to me. If you're completing the positive ones, then it doesn't necessarily mean that the conversation is exactly what you would want it to be, but it plays out and you're able to communicate with each other.
Okay.
I really like this game, but I think I like the theme and mechanics maybe more than the way it actually I don't know if it wasn't always fun to play. What happens as you're going around the world, I said you start with a deck that has just triangles and circles in it, but as you travel, people use all kinds of different cards. You start out going to places that use triangles and circles, but then you very quickly start going to places where, okay, here's somebody who talks with triangles and squares. initially you don't have any cards that have squares on them. So sometimes you can fumble your way through a conversation with just the triangles you have. And like the conversation's very up and down, but you get there and you get a positive connection with them. Or like you just don't get the card you want in the moment and you can't connect with this person. But what happens is after every conversation that you have, the game offers you anywhere from 2 to 3 cards from the hands of the other player. So if I just tried a conversation with someone who has triangles and squares, even if the conversation failed, I'm going to get an opportunity to pick up a card that has squares on it. However, you can't increase the size of your deck. So you have, I think it's 8 cards in your deck. You always have to swap them out. So here's what happens is you go on your travels and you pick up new cards that allow you to converse with more people. At the end of the month, you have to come back home and talk to the people in your hometown, in particular, your best friend who's running the shop. And you start to lose the ability to talk to the people that you're friends and family with. So it does this
you're learning all these new languages.
Exactly. It does this really interesting thing where it's language, but it's also culture. Like it's also saying that like as you're going out and you're having these new experiences and you're learning how to interact with different types of people, you're kind of losing some of what allowed you to connect with the people back home. And it's a really, really impactful because I do think to some extent, I don't know, there's a little bit of a zero-sum nature to the game that I don't necessarily agree with. But it's also not wrong that like if you were constantly going out and seeing a whole other part of the world and then trying to come back and relate to the people that you left behind, there is a tension there. I just think it captures the nature of conversation, and especially conversation with people that are from different life experiences, from different cultures, who speak different languages. I feel like it captures all of that really fucking well, because there's also this, you know, when I have mostly triangles and circles and I'm trying to talk to somebody who has triangles and squares, man, we're so fucking close to getting it. Like we're so fucking close to connecting, and it's so frustrating when it doesn't quite work out. And you know, you were trying like so hard to make that connection, but it just wasn't quite there. Or like when you get into a conversation with someone who you don't have any matches with and you just have to play a bad card and they're like, why are you being mean to me? Or just leave me alone, or I don't understand you. And it's like, I came into it with the best of intentions, but there's a disconnect here that like, I'm not going to be able to bridge with one conversation. And I love that the game is like very actively like telling you, like, you can't just go through the world and expect to immediately connect with every person that you run into, nor can like you expect to, like, there are things that are common to all of us, and there's still like space to connect, but it doesn't happen overnight. And it takes work and effort. And also there's like a conscious decision you're going to have to make about who you want to connect with, because the game does force you to be like, okay, if you really want to connect with the square and triangle folks, then you're going to need to get a square and triangle deck. And that means that folks who have diamonds and circles, you're not going to be able to talk to them. So you can try to build a deck that's a jack of all trades, but then you're always going to be kind of struggling to get through interactions, which is ultimately what I ended up doing, because I wanted to see as much of the game as there was. And I got an ending that was like good for the characters, but was very clearly not meant to be like a happy ending. Like things worked out okay for the characters, but it wasn't, you know, they basically were sellouts. And so I can see like how in further playthroughs, I'm going to be going in with like more of a like, these are the people that I want to try to connect with and the story that I want to see more of. So I'm going to really build my deck in that direction. And I'm going to let these other narratives and these other people go.
I can see how that concept of when you have a mixed deck, like if you don't lean into getting to know one group of people deeply, you end up having this surface level, superficial relationship with a lot of people, and then you end up being sellouts. Like I feel like that emulates in real life how when you try to be someone who is there for everyone, you just end up kind of running yourself dry, and you don't end up having something deep with a smaller group of people. And that's really cool how the way you're speaking to how it emulates communication and culture and learning language.
Yeah. And like, I'm not talking a lot about the actual narrative of the game. And part of that's because like, I don't know, like I like the characters that I got to meet. I think there's a very serviceable narrative there, but what like has really drawn me to this game, what I think is going to keep me coming back to it and like what's really resonated is this overall like thematic approach to how they've tried to translate the concepts of language and like communicating across culture into this ostensibly very simple card game. And I'm just really impressed with what they were able to achieve there. I think it's nuts that this is the first game from this studio. Really excited to see what else they come up with. I definitely recommend people check the game out, especially because it's on the shorter side. Like I said, I definitely got frustrated with it several times, but I think that's kind of the point. So I don't know that I wasn't always having quote unquote fun, but I also don't think that is all that games have to offer. And I think as an experience of like really thinking about how we connect with other humans and what language and culture, how language and culture plays into that. It was a really, really thoughtful game.
It makes me think about like when you talked about those frustrating situations where like maybe you have triangle and circle cards and someone else has triangle and square. So you're getting so close to connecting, but it's just not working. It just makes me think of like in real life, like those awkward situations where like maybe you really like someone and you want to be their friend or get to know them, but you're just so fucking awkward with them or the ways that you communicate or exist in space together just do not mesh. And it's just painful for everybody. Like, I don't know. It's really cool how like it's very simple, just sort of matching symbols to create a chain like card game. But I love the way the mechanics sort of mirror the social mores, however to describe them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so. I've just been thinking a lot about how like the way I as a person in real life show up in spaces and communicate, and how I can show up and I can say a thing, and how that will hit every single person in the room differently, and we will either create a connection based on that, or it will be a stopping point for further communication. And I don't know if we think about that as much as we should. I guess, and I'm especially thinking in the context of like white supremacy culture and how that's like so dominant in the way we're expected to interact with each other, and how that like really hurts and stymies multicultural communication or prevents folks who don't communicate that way from being able to participate in conversation or connect across that. I don't know. Just got me thinking.
Signs of the Sojourner. Is it available? I'm sorry, you may have said it already, but what platforms is it on?
It's a PC, PlayStation, Xbox, Switch.
Cool.
Yeah, so check it out. We'll go ahead and move into our guest for today, which is Amanda Hudgins. Like so many of our guests, Amanda does a little bit of everything, but their day job is at SuperSoul, which is a small game development company focused on offering dev services and training, as well as on building educational games and simulations that can integrate into classrooms and learning spaces. Amanda has a specific focus and passion on alternative controls design, which they'll explain more in the interview. We've offered a lot of different perspectives on games on pixel therapy, but the conversation with Amanda felt particularly unique in their approach to games as a primarily tactile experience, which games absolutely are. But it also seems like it's a piece of the experience that feels like it gets overshadowed a lot by more flashier talking points like graphics, writing, and combat systems. So this opportunity to talk with Amanda and really think about how the way we physically interact with the game influences the impact it might have, or considering how a game's story and themes might be conveyed through its like physicality. I don't know. It was just a really great shift in perspective for me, and for you too, Spencer. And we just really appreciated everything Amanda brought to that combo. So without further ado, here's our interview with Amanda Hudgins.
Welcome to the virtual Pixel Therapy Studio, to our wonderful guest. Would you care to share your name your pronouns, and maybe just a little bit about how you're spending your time lately.
Sure. My name is Amanda Hudgins. I usually go by they, them. And what was the third question?
How have you been spending your time?
A little bit of a lot of things. That's just kind of who I am. I do a lot of different things, but right now the primary things are, I have mostly been reading and writing. And then also I have my day job at SuperSoul where I make video games, but yeah.
And for the folks at home who may not be familiar, could you give us like a sentence or two about SuperSoul?
Oh, okay. So SuperSoul is a independent games company out of Lexington, Kentucky. We specialize in a lot of different things, but we've done art games. We've done client work for people like Girls Make Games and Google, as well as other local companies like Mommy's Best Games. They just released, they're still releasing the Action Pack, which is like all their older titles just re-released, as well as Piggy Ball. And we help port their games. And then, I guess I should also mention that I make a lot of stuff on my own.
Yeah.
If you've heard of me, and you have not heard of me, but if you've heard of me, it's probably because in 2019, Kotaku wrote an article about an event in Chicago where people smashed a bunch of guitars on stage. And that was my game that I made with my partner.
Oh my God.
And I also made a game called Sententable, which has 100 buttons. It's a 100-button fight stick.
I am excited to talk more about the 1,000-button project in a little bit, but I somehow missed the guitar smashing thing, so I'd love to hear a little bit more about what that was.
Oh yeah. That's one night only, and it was inspired by I've totally spaced on the name of the actual event now, but it was canceled because it had some abusive people who were organizing it. But it was at GDC for that year, and the conceit was that at the end of the night, all of the games would be destroyed. But they meant they would delete the code. There's a Natalie Lawhead game that they made for it that was I think it was a desktop creature that you were supposed to love and cherish, and then at the end of the night you killed it. That kind of thing. But I was most of my work is in alternative control, so I was that's cool and all, but what if the controller was destroyed? Wouldn't that be way cooler?
Yeah.
And so I worked with the event Bit Bash, which is out of Chicago, which was a really great event. And I really bummed that it didn't happen last year because of the pandemic. But they helped cover the cost because it turns out it's really expensive to buy 17 guitars. And yeah, even the cheapest ones on Amazon. I wrote the longest Amazon review about the quality of these guitars and smashing them. And yeah, the basic idea was it was kind of like a Rock Bandish game where you played the guitar and then at the very end you took the guitar and you smashed it onto the ground as your final destructive salvo. Yeah. And I worked with I worked for and paid a bunch of really cool, mostly queer music groups and a lot of punk music, and it was really cool. And it was one night only. At the end of the night, we destroyed all the controllers, we destroyed the code, we destroyed everything. We destroyed the glove that controlled the devices. It was great. It can never be done again.
Yeah.
It's also way too expensive to be done again.
Right. Yeah, I don't know, the idea of destroying software, it's not with a bang, but literally nothing, because it's just deleting, what does that even mean? And so this idea of bringing it into a physical space, and I feel even playing when I think of the times when I'm playing Guitar Hero or rock star type bands, what's so fun about it is being with your friends, but kind of capturing, not really, but sort of engaging in that energy of being on a stage together. What would it be like to kind of be in unison and all on our instruments? And so the kind of continuing that to the point of like this finale where I'm smashing the guitar on stage, like that's way more like actually playing with a band than playing Rock Hero Guitar Hero Rock Band without the smashing, in my opinion.
The wildest part about that whole process was mostly that I hadn't seen the space till we got there, but they gave us like a legit 1,000-person auditorium to play this in.
Wow.
So we were on stage. You could have fit maybe 1,000 people in that auditorium. It's this massive auditorium because it's at the basically Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago was where they had it. And it's this massive building and this massive auditorium. And I was like, are you sure you want me to smash guitars on this stage? And be like, it's fine. Go ahead. And also we had never tested it because it's impossible to test a game that you destroy. So, that was alarming.
Yeah, like a lot of things had to converge, and I'm glad it all worked out.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But yeah, if you've heard it, that's usually, if people have heard of me, that's one of the reasons, because Kotaku did do a write-up.
Oh. Yeah. And speaking of your work, and like you just mentioned that you are based in Kentucky.
Yes.
And I wanted to take a moment to chat about that because I feel like a lot of people make the assumption that people who make games or work in media are all in these big metro areas on the East or West Coast.
They're all coastal elites.
Yeah, coastal elites. And you wrote a piece for bulletpointsmonthly.com on Kentucky Route Zero, which was a critically acclaimed game that really was released over several years in phases. This was a game that we discussed more in depth in episode 3 if any folks are interested in that. But if it's all right with you, Amanda, I was hoping to just read a couple sentences from that piece and ask you about it a little. So in this piece, and again, folks, check it out on bulletpointsmonthly.com. You write, a game is never going to show you the real Kentucky the same way a series of NYC alleyway shots aren't going to show you the real New York City. But takes on Kentucky usually fall in the direction of a more rural state of mind. Vast empty fields, coal mines, cheap buildings held together by hope and grit. It'd be hard to gather from most media produced about the state that Lexington, Kentucky ranked in the top 25 of most educated cities in the U.S., right up there with Hartford, Connecticut, San Francisco, or that we're queerer than people expect. A Gallup poll states that Louisville, Kentucky is in the top 15 of metropolises in terms of LGBT citizens, or that there are more queer people in the South than other regions of the U.S. Kentucky Route Zero, the game, for all its strengths, isn't about this kind of place. It's about a Kentucky that doesn't exist. Name a game about Kentucky. There's only one. Beautiful piece, and thank you for writing it. What do people get wrong about the game development community in Kentucky?
Usually they don't know that it exists, is probably the thing. And like credit to Kentucky Route Zero, like Jake Elliott did move to the state somewhere between, I think, Act 3 and Act 4. His wife is from Elizabethtown, so he moved here sometime then. They're raising their kids here. He's a great dude. So it's super weird when I wrote the piece because I was like, man, I feel like I'm dunking on this dude, but he liked it and retweeted it.
Yeah.
Like, he's a nice dude.
Yeah.
But it's even weirder because we're a super small community, so I've seen him a bunch.
Hi.
No, it's really great. It was a good thing that I wrote it right before the pandemic. So
just take a nice year without running into him.
Yeah, no, he's a great dude. But seriously, yeah, I mean, mostly it's just that people don't know it exists. There's a really great co-op out of Kansas called Flyover Indies. And I think that's still the best name for this region of the US in general, is that people just don't realize that people make games at all. There's a really fantastic piece in Polygon by Blake Hester where he went around the country and he interviewed game developers from everywhere, really. He went and found them where they lived and and they're everywhere, right? I know people who make games in tiny cabins in West Virginia and stuff like that. And that's part of it. That's a big part of it. The other thing is that we were semi-jokingly, but not jokingly, referred to for a couple years as the all control capital. Because for like 3 or 4 years, you couldn't go to all control GDC without seeing a Kentucky developer there. Like, which is amazing because like that was the case with like MIT. Like MIT would always have like, or not MIT, usually NYU would always have like one person there, and also Kentucky would have one person there. So it's like we were representing a part of sort of this weird community, and people just don't know that we're here, and they don't know that we're doing weird things. Like when I would go to GDC usually, or other big events, but usually GDC, I remember at least once somebody told me, like I told them where I was from and they apologized to me.
Ew.
And I told them to fuck off. But, because like, what does that even mean? But like, that's usually the kind of reaction you get is like people are confused or they're apologetic or they're like, well, I don't even know what that would be like. It's like everywhere else, except I can afford to live here and you can't to live where you live. So
yeah. It's such a self-centered assumption that you should need to apologize to someone for living in a place that you have no context for. It's like,
well, they've never been here. Like they have no idea. If they've been here, usually they've driven through the state on like I-75 to get to Florida or something.
Is there any particular reason that you choose to continue to base your practice out of Kentucky? Like, what is your connection to the land and what keeps you there?
I mean, it's mostly just, I don't really have a specific reason to leave, which doesn't sound like this really deep, like, reach or anything. Like, I don't, like, I mean, when I was like 18, I was like, oh, I got to get out of here, right? Like I feel like everyone feels that way when you're like 17, 18, you're like, I've got to get out of here. But I didn't want to pay to go to college. So I got into the state school locally. So I went to University of Kentucky, for my undergrad, for both of my undergrads. And so I went to so I went to school for that here. And, because originally I applied to everywhere. I just wanted to leave the state. I wanted to leave the country.
Yeah.
And it just didn't happen. And then it was, because I don't know, I think at one point it became clear to me that like anything I was trying to flee wasn't inside of the state, it was inside of me. Just to put it like real bluntly, like there's nothing that I'm going to like fix by going to New York that I couldn't fix cheaper here. Also, I've got major sticker shock. Like I keep bringing it up, but I don't like. It's wild to me. Like I'll see someone post what they think is like a good deal apartment, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm leaving my apartment. You know, you guys can move in. It's $2,500, and it's 1 bedroom." And it's like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And like, honestly, like it's not some sort of like hellscape. Like it's Kentucky. Like, I have a really good community here. We have a really good arts program, like locally, that supports us. We're working on like state funding and stuff, but like we have a good arts program here that like supports us. We are getting better with like education. Like we're growing the community here in a way that I'm not sure I could do or be a part of if I moved to a place like New York or Chicago or, God forbid, San Francisco.
You mentioned Kentucky and MIT both being hubs of alt control design.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you could take a minute to talk about what that is, like that practice.
Oh, sorry. What you want to know what alt control design is?
Yeah.
Okay, so alternative control is sort of a catch-all term for non-standard control schemes. So if you are someone... so a standard control scheme for a game is pretty easy to recognize. It's usually a gamepad or keyboard. But it's usually, if it's mass-produced, it's a standard control scheme. Usually. There are exceptions. Sometimes, like, Nintendo will release, like, a set of bongos for their that one bongo game. Like that's technically an alternative control. But usually we don't talk about things like that in that same sphere. An alternative control game is usually taking those control schemes and altering them significantly. So with the 1,000 button project, Sententable, the idea there is like, oh, instead of one button, you have 100 buttons. So it's either, so that's an example of like extending it. Or with something like probably the most well-known example, if anybody's gone to an event and seen it, would probably be Line Wobbler by Robin Baumgarten. It's a one-dimensional dungeon crawler. It's an LED light strip, the kind you'll see in like TikTok videos that are around like e-girl bedrooms. And it's like that, except that it's addressable LED light strip. And the control scheme is actually, it's basically a doorstop. And you flick the doorstop and it shoots a light up the light strip. So they can be really abstracted. They can be the same, but more. They can be a lot of different things. It's usually just taking a pre-existing thing and just altering it substantially.
And what kind of emotions or what's the point of altering the control substantially? Like, I was just thinking about it, and it's like, I guess, is it art just for the sake of creating? Like, it doesn't always have to mean something deep, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But I'm just curious, like, why you personally, like, why you do it?
It depends on the project. Usually, I'm a really slow designer, so I like to think about things for a really long time. Like, the current one I've been thinking about and working on and prototyping has been I'm working on an alternative controller that's a quilt, where it's embroidered and it's using a conductive thread, so you can touch it. And it's specifically related to both the fact that quilting is something that was taught to me by my grandmother, and also it's going to talk about dementia, because my grandmother, who just passed away, had dementia. And so I want to tie, like, that's the emotional connection. I want you to be able to feel it and touch it, because that's the tactile sensation is something that is like a very physical sense, right? And I know that you can tie things better to it by touching them than you can by me, like, handing you like an Xbox 360 controller and saying, here, go through this room.
Yeah.
And this room is full of my memories of my grandmother. And that's not to say that those are lesser games, because, like, I know everyone sobbed like a baby during that Dragon Cancer. Like, you can do that. You can build, like, powerful experiences without, like, touching things. But I think that there is, like, a tactile nature to that. And then on the other hand, like, I don't know, sometimes I just want to build a thing with 100 buttons in it. Because it seems fun.
Yeah. Yeah, let's talk about the 1,000 button project a little bit more.
Sure.
And folks, there's a website for it. It can be found at buttonsr.cool. Amazing link name, by the way.
Thank you.
And so you've spoken about it a couple times now, but can you just sort of like paint a visual picture of what it looks like and how it works?
Yeah, sure. So it is actually an IKEA children's table that I bought from Goodwill. It has 100 individually drilled holes. Don't ever do that. Ever. It has 100 individually drilled holes, and they each have a button in them. They're in a grid of 98. There's 2 off to the side. And the idea is that each player gets 49 buttons. And those buttons randomize at the start of every round. Every button does a different thing. So they'll do attacks, changes to the shaders, visuals, and sound effects. So there's a layered soundtrack from Too Mellow. And it'll basically take all of those aspects and it'll remix them based on which buttons you press. Like, you start the game and you're in a white room with 1 red and 1 blue character, and 2 minutes in, it's completely unrecognizable. 2 seconds in, it's usually unrecognizable. It's a complete cacophony. And it's best 2 of 3, and it randomizes at the start of every round.
And, like, I guess I'm trying to imagine, I feel like if it were me and I was walking up to an IKEA table with 1,000 buttons on it,
yeah.
Even if someone told me, like, oh, you're only in charge of 49 buttons, I'd still kind of be like, oh my fuck. I don't know if I can cognitively wrap my brain around more than like 4 buttons. So I'm just kind of wondering how people approach it and like what kind of, if you have any favorite anecdotes or reactions that you'd like to share.
There's a couple, yeah. So, I mean, the first thing is that you just general strategy, this isn't really answering the question, but is you don't treat the button as an individual button, you treat the board as a button, if that makes sense. So it's the buttons are no longer single objects, they are a collection of objects. So your whole hand is now hitting 7 things at once. They're all individually hooked up. I wanted to make that very clear because so if you have a keyboard matrix on your keyboard has something called it's like a specific type of matrix. And so if you press 10 keys at once, it's not going to actually register all 10 keys usually. Depends on the keyboard. But it'll register 3 of them, and that's because of the way that their keys are registering, because it doesn't need to register 10 key presses at once. It's a way more efficient way to do that. I didn't want that. I wanted the computer to register all 10 presses at once. So it does, which is a mess. But that also means that you just press everything. So the best people at this game are usually at about 2nd to 4th grade. Fantastic. Some of my favorite ones are, we did the Hand-Eye Society Fancy Dress Ball in Toronto. And 2 guys who had never played it before walked up, full suits, and and one of them slapped down. I don't know if you've ever seen Canadian money, but it looks incredibly fake.
Oh yeah, it's all fancy
in plastic.
Yeah,
but he takes it out and he slams it on the table and he goes, "It goes to winner." And I was like, "Okay." And he and his bud just play like 2 massive children, and one of them takes the prize. Usually it goes, someone will win most of it. It's usually split 50-50. Usually you don't have someone winning the first 2 rounds. It's usually someone wins round 1, the other person wins round 2, and the third person wins either way. And third round goes to one or the other. It's hopefully balanced enough for that. And then the other ones I love are just at MagFest. I think the first year I showed, a guy walked up who was definitely a real fighting game dude. And he had his fighting game controller, and he was really serious. And he had I'm going to presume
he walks around with his controller with him. He's that serious.
Yeah. And he had, I'm 99% certain it was either girlfriend or wife. I don't know the status of the relationship, but they were romantic partners, and she was standing there next to him, and he's like, "I want to play," and she's like, "I don't like playing with you." She doesn't want to play fighting games with him, and she beats the shit out of him.
Yes. Oh my god.
In no time at all, because the problem with people who are really good at fighting games is they try to game it. They're like, if I just correctly because by the time you find the one super special move, you've been backed into the corner by an 8-year-old who just wants to spam the button that drops cardboard boxes on your head.
Yeah.
And also happen to find the punch button at the same time. It's nonsensical.
Yeah.
But that kind of interaction is what I live for.
I really love this concept because it just makes me think about how it's, first of all, taking a video game out of the context of always having to be tied to a screen of some sort. And when I think about the barriers that may exist to why someone might not game or think that video games are for them, I think of things like, okay, the the cost, the sheer cost of like a console or a gaming PC, God forbid. There's the learning curve of knowing how to use a certain type of controller. And like you said, like if you're playing against someone who's very experienced at a certain game, you immediately are it's harder for you if you haven't already been playing with that controller or have familiarity with that game. And this idea that that playing field is just like totally equalized by putting in front of folks just this object that begs them to just start smashing and see what happens. I don't know. I think that's just a really cool way of getting back to what games are for, what video games, like at their base, like play level, like what they can do to bring people joy. I realized I hadn't asked you, like, what's your personal history with video games? Like, have you always been someone who is a gamer?
So, yes and no. So, in the sense, I've never identified myself as a gamer.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like that's, A, it's a very loaded term. And B, like, because like it calls to mind like a lot of things that I don't like recognize in myself.
Mm.
But yes, my parents were both really big into games. Like, my mom used to say that they didn't have like a TV. They had a TV, but they didn't have like cable when I was really little. But they would just like, they would run one of the Super Mario Brothers games, like as background music when I was really little, just so that they had like something going as like background music.
I love some parents choose Mozart, some parents choose Beethoven. Amanda's parents chose the Super Mario Brothers theme music.
She told me that at one point. I was like, what? But like, yeah, my mom played a lot of Myst when I was a kid, and my dad played a lot of like the original Warcraft and like StarCraft. So I've always done that. But my parents were really big on, you could only play a game if it was non-violent. Which is hilarious considering the Warcraft.
World of Warcraft, yeah.
So it was only allowed to play games that were non-violent, and they had to be multiplayer because I have a younger sister. So I played like games that like nobody else recognizes. Like when people are talking about like Nintendo 64, they're like, "Oh man, GoldenEye," and I was like, "Absolutely not!" Like, there's no way my parents would have let me play GoldenEye. Like, there's guns in it. Like, they were one of those like really strict like no violence families.
What about Super Smash Brothers? Because it's Mario, but also fighting.
No, we didn't. No, the closest I think we had was like the Pokemon Stadium games. Like that's
those were good.
Like, those were good, and like all because they had all the mini games. So you could do those, and then, but mostly like racing games. So like Star Wars Pod Racing, and like they had this really terrible car racing games where all the cars were also like mutant creatures. It's called like Raw. It's something racers. I don't know. It's Scars, I think is what it's called. Literally nobody but me knows this. I've found it. I know it exists. It isn't one of those like it doesn't exist except in my brain.
Yeah.
It exists. But like that game we played constantly. It's terrible. Nobody should play it. But like that was the kind of games we played. And so I stopped playing when I was in like late middle school, early high school, or because by that point everyone I knew was playing GTA. I still wasn't allowed to play violent games, so there was nothing for me to play that would have been comparable to what my friends were playing. And then I started playing indie games again when I got into undergrad. So, and which is still mostly what I play. And I mean, I ran an interactive fiction website called Storycade probably 7 years ago now. Because that was like one of my first like reintroductions back into like video games was stuff like Porpentine's Crystal Casual Warrior, anything by Emily Short, like really the tiny like small indie projects that are focused on like writing. It was sort of my re-entry back into games.
Cool. And since your re-entry, Like, why do you play games now? Like, what do you get out of gaming?
It depends. I usually, if I'm playing, it's usually either for just like fun because it's with someone who wants to play like a multiplayer game, or I just I play a lot of roguelikes. So
have you been playing Hades?
I have played a little bit of Hades, but my partner has stolen the Switch.
Oh my god!
I have not played because he's playing Hades, so and we only have one Switch. So I mostly have not played as much Hades as he has. Like last year, probably the most time I spent was in Animal Crossing, and then that was mostly it. Yeah.
It's so validating to hear someone say, oh, I haven't been playing Hades because my partner stole the Switch, because I live with my partner and we have one PS5, which I'm very blessed to even have. Like, the idea of trying to get a second PS5 right now, I saw that it's been selling out in seconds, and I'm just like, okay, kind of put that off for another few months. But like, you know, we have one living room and one TV and one PS5. And so my partner has had to spend the past 100 hours watching me play Assassin's Creed Valhalla on the PS5. And it's so gorgeous and beautiful. And there's definitely like moments where he very politely approaches me and is like, hey, baby, like, would it be okay if I created a little? How can I say no? But there's no such thing as Assassin's Creeding just a little as anyone who plays this game. So it's a great learning experience in sharing and just really being in tune with my partner emotionally.
For some reason, I don't. It reminds me for some reason of like, and like obviously J.K. Rowling's a TERF, but when I was like a kid, I remember my mom would buy one of the copies of the Harry Potter books as they were coming out, and there were three of us in the house that were reading them at the same time, and so the rule was that the book was not allowed to leave the chair. There was one chair in the house, and so if the book was on the chair, and you could read the book when it was on the chair. And if you left the chair, the book stayed, but you also lost the right to be mad if someone took the chair while you were gone.
Oh my
God. So we're going to be trading PS5 time based on bladder size. That's our new system. Oh my God, I love that. So, Amanda, are there any particular games that you've played lately that you enjoyed, or any that excited you that you've played in the past couple months that you'd care to share?
I don't know. So I've been having a harder... I don't play as much as I used to because it's been stressful on my vision. So mostly like if I play something, it's usually in like short bursts, or it's for a paid gig. So most of the stuff I played this year and completed that wasn't like a tiny game I played like really quickly was like something that I needed to like write about. So like Doom Eternal or Kentucky Road Zero or Final Fantasy VII. What number is that? Yeah, the remake. So like, I don't know. The game that I always go back to is Tiny Islands. It's this little web browser game by totally spacing on his name right now, but
I'll look it up. David King?
Yes, it's David King's Tiny Islands. So that's the game that I play the most of, probably, in general. Because it's just this little game where it's like I forgot the specific type of game type it is. Like there's a board game type it's based off of. But it's this nice little game where you just like arrange stuff on a board. And there are a certain amount of cards. And then you select them and you place them on a board. And it's just really simple. And I like a game that's a nice like brain cleanser kind of thing. That has a nice round, for lack of a better word, that you can complete. Like, that's why I used to like speed run Downwell. Like, because you can complete the entirety of Downwell's story in like under 15 minutes, which is like the perfect amount of time for like, oh god, I'm rendering a video at work or something. And similarly with like Tiny Islands, like it's a good like, I have to wait for something to upload or I have to do something, so I'll just play this game for like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And then I will be done.
Yeah, that's I just take a minute to mention, now that we're mentioning Tiny Islands, it's defined as a roguelite as well as like resource management, manageable tasks, a city sim. It's a lot of things, but it looks really cool. It actually reminds me of, there's this board game called Tiny Towns. I guess this kind of visual puzzle having to do with architecture and town layouts it just works for people. But there's a really cool board game. Yeah, it just feels good. What can I say?
It just feels nice. And we had a channel, we still do, for the local game development group. We have a channel that's just dedicated to it. Every day it pops up with like, there's a daily challenge. And so it pops up and it's like, hey guys, daily challenge. Here's, if you want to participate, like thread your replies. And so
Cool.
people will drop in and like drop their high scores and stuff. So,
Aww.
and we've been doing that for like a year.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's awesome. And you mentioned that your relationships with gaming has been shifting due to the stress that it puts on your eyes. And I was wondering, like, what kinds of things do you find yourself looking for now out of video games that has changed over time?
So I have keratoconus, which is a degenerative eye condition. It's a sort of squishy cornea thing. Basically, I have cones. My cornea turns into it has a nice little cone on it. Currently, I'm only symptomatic on the left hand side. I do technically have it on both sides. What it causes is something called ghosting, which is basically double vision, but only with light. Which, as you can imagine, is not great with screens. So usually it mostly just comes down to a game really has to be worth my time for me to sit down and play it, because otherwise I'm going to end up with just a massive headache at the very least, if not just searing eye pain by the end of the process.
Yeah.
So it's just got to be worth the time to put into it. It also just causes me to prefer games that are have a decent amount of contrast into them. So like the Doom franchise in general, I find difficult. For example, like the Doom 2016 is a great game, fantastic playable game. Everything is the same shade of red.
Oh god.
And I cannot tell it apart, and it just like it's miserable in that respect. So it's just like an extra level when like selecting a game is just like, do I also want to like enjoy this experience like for other reasons, or like I'll have to tap out usually earlier, or at this point I also just usually have to play during the middle of the day.
And it's interesting when I think about like alternative controls, because like games shouldn't inherently have to be tied to a screen, especially because there's lots of different reasons why screens might not be the best medium for someone to enjoy a game. And like, do you ever see alternative controls being more of a mainstream application? Like, or do you think that it's more of an experiential?
So yes and no. So on the one hand, alternative controls usually work really well in accessibility functions, but they're not all inherently accessibility based. So with that, you have something like, say, Microsoft's accessibility controller that they debuted 2 years ago, I want to say, that big white and black thing with the pads on it, which
it's like
is
a
really
big
great.
mat. Yeah.
And it's really great, and it has a lot of functionality that really builds into that. And there's a lot of things that would be almost identifiably alternative controls that are accessibility controls. So, joysticks, breath tubes, things that are non-traditional ways of interacting with the way that we interact with the world, the way that other people interact with the world is a good example of that. But at the same time, cost-wise, it's just not efficient for most people. Like, I've had a couple people be like, "Oh, you should do a Kickstarter for Sustainable." Absolutely not. Who's going to buy a board that size? I built the thing and I wouldn't buy it. It's way too expensive. But usually, they're one-off items. Coming from just an environmental standpoint, that would be terrible. It would just be creating more plastic junk. But generally speaking, I think they tend to be really experiential. I think they're really great in places like museums and art shows. I really love them in art shows because they're a really great way for someone who might not view art as something that is for them. Their ability to touch it and interact with it, that tactile sensation is really there.
Yeah. And also that video games can be art too.
Yes. They definitely are. I've been in art galleries. I was in the Smithsonian. It's definitely art.
Fuck yeah. I was in the Smithsonian, bitches. It's art.
I said that the last time someone did art games art, and I was like, I don't know, I was in the Smithsonian. It's probably art.
You tell me.
That sounds like more of a name drop than it actually is. But yeah.
Yeah. Amanda, it's been awesome hanging out with you for this past hour.
Thank you so much.
Are there any projects you're working on right now that you'd like folks to know about, and where can people follow up and just follow your work?
I don't have anything that I'm actively talking about right now. That's not super public. The best way to follow my work is to follow me on Twitter. I'm at Barely Concealed on Twitter. I have a website, which is amandathrows.rocks. And I work with the company SuperSoul, which is supersoul.co. That is not a typo. And we do a bunch of different projects, and we're actually working on releasing a couple games this year. So that's the best way to find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us on Pixel Therapy.
Thank you.
Time is up for today's session of Pixel Therapy. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope that listening to our thoughts and feelings gave you some thoughts and feelings of your own. If you want more Pixel Therapy, come check us out at patreon.com/pixeltherapypod, where you can snag that monthly bonus episode for just $2 a month, plus opportunities to get involved with the community and influence the show directly. If you're not up for contributing monetarily, but you enjoyed this episode, there are lots of ways you can support us for free, including leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts and following us on Instagram and other social media at Pixel Therapy Pod. That stuff is just as important, and we appreciate it just as much. Remember that Pixel Therapy is a happy member of the But Why Though Podcast Network, so you can support us by supporting them and heading over to butwhythoughpodcast.com. That's though with a THO. Take a peek at the inclusive geek community they are building around pop culture news reviews and kick-ass podcasts like yours truly. And you can keep up with all of this stuff and more by visiting our website at pixeltherapypod.com.
Finally, since we like to put our money and our energy where our mouth is, we end every episode with a recommended side quest. As I was mentioning earlier, there's a really important organization that I wanted to bring folks' attention to. It is called Stop AAPI Hate. This is from their website. In response to the alarming escalation in xenophobia and bigotry resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic, the Asian Pacific Planning and Policy Council, Chinese for Affirmative Action, and the Asian American Studies Department of San Francisco State University launched the Stop AAPI Hate Reporting Center on March 19th, 2020. The center tracks and responds to incidents of hate, violence, harassment, discrimination, shunning, and child bullying against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in the United States. Our approach recognizes that in order to effectively address anti-Asian racism, we must work to end all forms of structural racism leveled at all Black, Indigenous, and other communities of color. This organization is really amazing. They have a multi-pronged approach. Actually, there's more about that. I'll read it. So our 5-pronged approach is to serve as the leading aggregator of all anti-Asian hate incidents, offer multilingual resources for impacted community members, provide technical assistance from rapid response to preventative measures, support community-based safety measures and restorative justice efforts, and advocate for local, state, and national policies that reinforce human rights and civil rights protections. They have an amazing team of volunteers who do everything from grocery shop to escort Asian American elders to and from places of worship or to do errands and things like that. They have a reporting system where you can submit incidents of anti-Asian hate that you can find on their website, and they use these reports to raise awareness on a national scale and just to advocate and make a lot of this stuff available to the public, which is just really important work. You can learn more about the organization and you can donate at stopaapihate.org. Definitely look into it. They have more resources and articles where you can read about just the history of Asian American experiences in the U.S. and just learn more about what's going on right now. Thank you. So check them out, stopaapihate.org.
Yeah, please check them out. Thank you for that side quest, Spencer. That is our show for today. So go forth, run a story mission, level up some stats, and don't forget to hug an NPC every now and then. We'll be back soon with some more
Pixel
therapy. Yeah. Bye-bye.